Why on earth should a watercolourist be worried about modelling paste? They're designed for acrylics, not for us. Isn't that the case? But maybe if you're an adventurous watercolourist, maybe you want to add some texture to your work. Maybe you don't want to just work on flat paper surface. Maybe you want to do mixed media work with your watercolours and you're wondering how they're going to react with all the lotions and potions that the acrylic people have got. So I have gathered together as many different modelling pastes as I could find, which was 8. There are hundreds in the world. And I've tested them out with watercolours to see how they might react. Are they absorbent? Are they repellent? Do they love the watercolour? Do they hate it? My name's Liz Chatterton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I share a tip or trick I wish I'd known about ages ago. And this week it's all about modelling pastes and how we might use them with our watercolours. Before we go on, I thought I should show you how I've used modelling paste so far. This is a little shiny because of the gold, but this is ink and watercolour on canvas, this panda, and in the background I have stenciled modelling paste to create this pattern and then use gold leaf. And in this painting I have stenciled lots of different leaves and a tropical forest and then painted this toucan on top. Again, this is on canvas, but I've done something very similar on paper. So here, say, I've painted and I've let the pattern show through and I've deliberately taken it into the bird, if you can see that. So join me testing out these 8 different pastes. Now, in whatever country you're in, you might have access to different modelling pastes. And it would be brilliant if you could share your experiences in the comments section if you've ever used it with watercolour, because then we can sort of build up a little library of knowledge without us all having to run out and buy a huge quantity of these pastes. And just before I go on, you may be shouting at your phone or computer screen, Schminker makes an aqua modelling paste specifically designed for watercolours. Why don't you just use that? And the truth is, it's extortionate. It's expensive. And I do big paintings. Look over my shoulder. That is watercolour on canvas. It's big. I've used lots of modelling paste and it really adds up. So I'm looking for a cost-effective alternative that I can use in mixed media or with my pure watercolours to add a little dimension to my work. I have collected together lots and lots of modelling pastes and texture pastes that I could get my mitts on to find out how they're going to work with watercolours. My plan is I've got little bits of watercolour paper. I've written the name of the paste, how much it costs, and then I'm going to scrape some through a stencil and just do a rough scrape with a palette knife on the other piece. Let it all dry, then put watercolour over the top to look for the sort of effect we get in the absorbency. Because what I'm looking for here is a modelling paste that lets me paint watercolour on it in a watercolour way, so it needs some sort of absorbency. But if I discover a paste that is totally non-absorbent, then maybe it will prompt me to think of some other ideas of how I might use it. So let the games begin. I have got 8 different pastes. Now, there are hundreds of these available worldwide. You may well have different ones available where you are, but I've tried to get a good selection here. This modelling paste is an acrylic medium and it's from the brand Art Studio, which in the UK is available from The Range, which is a big sort of big box store, I guess you'd call it. It is the cheapest one that I'm testing out. It is only £7.99, so that's just over €10 and about $10 for a litre. So I am so hopeful that this proves to be really good, because that would be a dream. Consistency, it's quite nice and thick, it's white, It looks glossy when wet, no surprise there. And all I'm going to do is do that, say, a rough texture onto my little piece of paper. I've also grabbed this stencil and I'm simply going to scrape through the stencil to get a pattern. I do this a lot as backgrounds when I'm working on canvas, and then I quite often gold leaf over the top of it, which gives a really beautiful finish in my opinion. And I hope you can see how cool that looks. When it's dry, we'll watercolour and see what happens there. So it says it will take between 2 and 24 hours to dry. The next one I'd like to try is Galleria, particularly because this is available worldwide and it's one of the easiest to get hold of. It's from Winsor & Newton, and all it says is stir well before use. This is 500 millilitres, so it's half the size of the previous one, and this costs £15.07. Prices are going to vary, but that's what, $18, $19 I guess, so almost twice as expensive as the previous one for half as much. But look at how thick it is. It's not as shiny as the previous one when wet. It feels a bit thicker. And let's first of all just put some on roughly. Let's put some on here. Scrape it through that stencil. So the reason I like the stencil as a little bit of a test is to see how crisp an outline I get. Probably would have been crisper if I'd wiped the stencil in between my tests. You can see I've got little marks, and I think that was from the previous one. Let's learn from experience and wipe my stencil over in between. And I will also wipe my knife. And it is important that you don't let this dry on any of your equipment, because modelling pastes are waterproof. They will not wash out. Oh, the evening sun is coming out, which is rather lovely. Next one I want to try is from Pabio, which is a Spanish brand, but this is a green modelling paste, or greener. So it uses 100% recycled bottle, the container, and the binder in the actual modelling paste, because the binder, the acrylic, is liquid plastic. So we may want to avoid as much plastic as possible in our life. So this is a slightly greener alternative. This is 475 millilitre. So that's roughly the size of the Galleria, and it's $13.85. Again, this is quite glossy, whereas that Galleria looks sort of more fluffy and marshmallowy. That's sort of more glossy. Just going to put a rough covering on there, scrape through the stencil and see whether we get a good crisp outline or not. And that's gone on very nicely. Next one I want to try is also from Pabio, so again that's a Spanish brand. This is their standard modelling paste, so it hasn't got that recycled binder, hasn't got the recycled pot. This is 1 litre and it was £9.24, so this is the second cheapest of all the ones I'm trying. We look at it, it looks quite glossy and creamy. So far they've all looked pretty much like this, apart from the Galleria. You obviously want your modelling paste to be pretty structured, because you don't want it, say, to run under this stencil, and the whole point of it is to give texture. And that's given me a really nice crisp outline there. So let's try this. This is from Vallejo, which is a Spanish brand. Now I've got here that it's 500 millilitres and it costs £16.75. I cannot believe that I paid that much for it, but when I just Googled just now, that was the price that was coming up. I'm sure I got it somewhere. Maybe it was on special offer. 2 pots of this. And I can't believe that I would have bought it if it was that expensive. Now looking at that, that looks thicker than the previous lot. Not quite as glossy. It's again a bit more marshmallowy like the Galleria. So I will be interested to see how this performs. That's given us a nice crisp mark. So far they've all gone through the stencil really nicely. The next one I want to try is from a brand called Creative Dec, which I think is made in the UK. I could have that totally wrong. It's a kilogram, so it's about a litre, and it was £15.99. I've never used this brand before, but let's give it a go. Right, well that's a surprise. Can you see that colour there? It's rather white like everyone else. Oh, I better read the instructions here. Oh, it doesn't say anything particularly. That is really different from everyone else. I'm going to give that a good stir. It's almost sandy. It says it's fine grained, but whereas the others were very smooth, white, some were glossy, some a little bit more marshmallowy, this looks a bit like a sandcastle. Now that could be an issue if we're painting in watercolours, because of course, and that you can even hear it, can't you? That is really sandy. And of course it's not white, so we're not going to get the zing of the colours. I do not know how this is going to go through my stencil, but just shows that, oh, listen to that sand. Well, it's not sand, whatever it is, just shows that just because they're called the same thing, they are all going to be different. And who knows, maybe when this is dry, it'll be our favourite. Or maybe I will have wasted my money so that you don't have to. Okay, it's got sort of slightly more jaggedy edges from those little bits and particles in there. But we might be able to do something with that, I don't know. We'll have to see when it's dry. And of course, perhaps it will dry lighter. Just because it's brown in the pot, maybe, I don't know. The next one I'm going to try is again called a texture paste rather than modelling paste from Rosa, which is a Ukrainian brand. I've been trying to use their watercolours more, really as my way of trying to support or show my support to Ukraine. This is 500 millilitres and was £13.56. It's not that easy to get hold of, but I managed to track some down. This is feels quite light. It seems to be keeping its shape pretty well, but it doesn't feel quite as thick as the others. Let's just try that stenciling. Oh, I don't think I properly cleaned the stencil. I can still hear that sand, that gritty noise. Let's see what that looks like. It seems to have stenciled okay. I was a bit concerned because it does feel thinner, but that has left a nice crisp pattern, so I think we're okay. Let's see when it dries. The last one I want to try is actually a fibre paste from Golden. So it is 237 millilitres for £17.99, and I think that makes it the most expensive one that I've got. I bought it for another project. Oh, when I bought it was £17.95. There's inflation for you. Yeah, I bought it for another sort of mixed media project, and I just wondered, I thought it would be fun because I've got it, let's try it out. So we're back to a white thick paste, definitely thicker than that last one from Rosa, but it's got bits in it. It has got fibres in it. And when it dries to a sort of papery surface. And I thought it might be interesting to see how watercolour would go over the top of it. So it's not quite as a crisp mark as some of the other modelling pastes, but it's got quite a bit of texture to it. Again, because of those fibres, I'm not sure how it will stencil, whether I'll get a crisp outline or not. And there is only one way of finding out. Oop! Oh, well, that would have been crisp, except I just dropped it. Right, I'm going to scrape that all off and start again. That does show you if you make a mistake, as long as you scrape it off immediately, you're fine. Right, shall we do this a bit more carefully? So it has given a crisp outline, but again, slightly jagged on the edges, a bit like that gritty, sandy one. I am intrigued to see how that will dry. Golden do all sorts of amazing different mediums that are all designed for acrylics, but potentially could work with watercolour. So worth having a little play with those if you have an opportunity. And just to remind you, why am I looking at this? It's because I want to add texture to my watercolour, but the aqua modelling paste from Schminke, which is modelling paste purely designed for watercolour, 100 millilitres costs $14.99. It's really expensive. A litre of that, if we multiplied that by 10, would be £148, and I'm not paying that for a litre, so I'm looking for an alternative that might work with our watercolours. I'm going to leave my samples to dry overnight, then come back and test it out with watercolour so we can see whether it absorbs or repels the watercolour, and whether that gives us lots of ideas of how we might use it in our work. It's the next day and I am really excited to try out these little samples and see what's going on. So that everything is dry, and let's just go through them and show you. Those were the Creative Dec texture paste. I wondered if they would shift in colour, and as you can see, they definitely haven't. It is interesting, as they've dried, you can see the difference in colour, I hope. So that is a really bright white against the watercolour paper, and that is definitely not as white. So we've got a real range from definitely beige through off-white, not quite as off-white, bright white. So that's a learning if the whiteness of this surface is important to you. I've grabbed a palette that was left over from another painting project. Good opportunity to use up some leftover colours. That's phthalo blue. I think that's permanent rose. That's definitely burnt sienna. Definitely quin gold. Possibly a quin magenta, she says. So which colours you use doesn't really matter at this point. I think that's indigo. What I'm looking for is, does the modelling paste absorb or repel? And the way I'm going to do that is just brush paint on top and look. And immediately you can see this Art Studio modelling paste is repelling. It doesn't seem, let's do some mix. It doesn't seem to be absorbing, and we're not getting lots of yummy sort of gradual mixes. It's quite an interesting effect. You know, it doesn't mean that's right or wrong. If we put the paint on the area that hasn't got any modelling paste on, you can really see that showing up. On our stencil, say we were doing a mixed media piece and wanted the stenciling to really show up, I am anticipating it will repel, and naturally we will get the pattern showing, just not absorbing the watercolour very much. I wonder if we used thicker watercolour. So yeah, if we use thicker, I mean, it goes on, just obviously isn't sinking into the modelling paste. If we want to emphasise that pattern, I wonder if we can do a bit of wipe off, or we could let it dry and then gently wipe off. And if we wanted to emphasise the pattern, of course, what we could always do is actually flood the valleys like that. So this could be quite an interesting combination. Non-absorb. Oop, if I could spell properly. But the next is the Galleria from Winsor & Newton. Ah, that's interesting. So that is absorbing more. We saw this sort of bubble up and bead up on top of the modelling paste. Here it's sinking in, so that's way more absorbent. So if I go over this, I am not expecting the pattern to show up dramatically. We saw the white almost push away before. Here you can see it's absorbing. Of course you can see the stenciling, but that's a more subtle effect. So, ooh, still can't spell, bent. And that was pretty white, wasn't it? Gee, that's really pretty, isn't it? So this is the Villarejo. Ah, that's interesting. That is beading up in a very similar way to the art studio. You can see that, so not very absorbent. And then I would expect to see a similar effect that we got with the art studio one. Maybe not quite so dramatic. What I'm going to do is let them dry and then try wiping off, and that'll also help me understand the absorbency. Right, this is the golden fibre paste. It's definitely rougher just to the feel. Why that's important, I wouldn't want to use a very soft natural hair brush to paint on top of this. This is a synthetic brush. It's coping fine, but it's something to be aware of. Ooh, that goes on differently. Oh, that's very absorbent. It's almost like there's holes in this and sort of bubbles of air are coming out. Let's mix some colours on. Very abs. And we're getting some nice soft mixes there. Just if we compare, again, that was pretty absorbent, but I think this is more absorbent. Put that lovely permanent rose over here. So I can really feel the roughness of this surface. Yeah, that is very absorbent. So this is the Pabio Studio Green. I'll put that as an off-white. It'll be interesting to compare this to the other Pabio one we've got and see whether they're sort of a similar formulation. Oh, so again, not very absorbent. Look how that's beading up. And you can see how we end up with those white hills. That was the Pabio Studio Green. This is the ordinary Pabio. Oh, that's interesting. So that was the Pabio Studio Green. This is the ordinary Pabio. This is more absorbent than that. It just didn't bubble up in the same way. actually that's quite nice. I was kind of expecting them to behave in the same way, and they definitely don't. Again, let's just do that comparison. Pabio Studio Green and Pabio Studio. Yeah, not that absorbent. You can see it moving and being repelled slightly by the paste. But interestingly, it's not utterly repelling that colour. So I would say it's kind of a mid-absorbency. Would that be a fair comment? Definitely not as unabsorbent as this first one, but it's still slightly repelling. And you may be very grateful to know that we are on the final one. So this is obviously off-white, and this was definitely the most off. So if I wanted really bright clear colours, this is however it performs, I would not choose this. And we already know that it was really rough and sandy. Oh yeah, that's very absorbent. The colour is really, really sinking in. So along with the fact that it is darker and the colours sinking in more deeply, that really is darkening the colours and dulling them down. But say, I don't know, you wanted a textured background to do a moody landscape, maybe that would be rather cool. Stencil has given really sharp edges. I can feel them as I'm brushing. That's a rather lovely effect. This was my least favourite and a bit of a surprise when I used it, but actually that's quite dramatic in its texture. Well, that is a really pleasant surprise, because say I didn't like it at all coming out of the tub, but I could see using this for definitely for some sort of landscape backgrounds if I wanted to add texture. We'll let these all dry and then see how the colour lifts off and draw a few conclusions. These little samples are well and truly dry, and our final test is going to be seeing how we can lift watercolour from these. So I've got a bit of magic eraser, which is usually used for cleaning around the house, but if you dampen it, squeeze it out really, really well, even possibly dab it off on a bit of kitchen towel. It is great for lifting watercolours. So what I'm going to do is just wipe it over the surface and see how much of the colour I can lift. And I am starting with the ones that were really non-absorbent. This is the Art Studio one, and look how much has come off. I can still see a little bit of blue, not surprised because that was phthalo blue I used. Let's try again here. So lift away and then dab off with kitchen towel. Should I want to lift, say I was using stenciling as a pattern, I reckon if I was relatively careful, I would be able to lift lots of that colour to bring out the pattern, and indeed I can. So look at that. You know, if that was something that was important to you, you could really, really bring out the pattern in your mixed media work by lifting. Okay, so that was the Art Studio and the Via Echo. Let's choose the next one, which we also didn't think was very absorbent, and that was the Pabio Studio Green. And again, it's lifted really almost back to the white, possibly not quite as much. So if I'm starting to put these in order, I would say that is slightly more absorbent than the other two. I've now got the Rosa texture paste, so I wouldn't expect it to lift quite as well. And yeah, we've got more of that blue staying there. It still does lift, but not quite back to the white. Now this is the Galleria, which we said was absorbent, and you can see it's not lifting a huge amount. Some's coming off, but not a huge amount. That was the Pabio Studio modelling, and that has lifted probably more than the Galleria. And then these are the two I'm really interested in. These are our most absorbent ones, and I'm being pretty rough with that. You can see a little bit lifts, but not a whole lot. Again, a little bit lifts, not a whole lot. I, just for my own sake, I'm going to number them in order of absorbency. So there you go. Watercolours and modelling paste, if you want to use them for this sort of mixed media effect or for creating texture in your paintings, they are not created equal. Do test them before you use them, because you may get unpleasant surprises or pleasant surprises. But doing quick tests like this will really help you know what you've got. If you've used modelling paste with success with watercolour, please pop the details in the comments section on this video, because then that can act as a resource for all of us, and we don't have to all go to the expense of buying a pot of the stuff if it's not going to do what we want.